Well, hello
Nice
and
intro.
welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I am your host, Shawn Needham, along with my beautiful wife, Janet, and our producer, Lindsay. And we are streaming at the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Studio in Moses Lake, Washington. And today we've got two very special guests on. If you watched Thursday's show, our midweek podcast last week, we had Joseph Hunter on, who told his story about recovery, and he wants to get his story out so he can save other lives, just like the guys we're having on today, Victor, Estrada, and Nokey Pando. And they're going to tell their story. They've got two similar but very different stories, and they are both in recovery now to help others. And we want to get the word out so we can help save other people's lives. And I tell you, I've heard both their stories already, and I think if some of you are like me, I think sometimes we just don't understand these things are going on. I mean, I go to work, I go home, I kind of maybe just keep my blinders on. I don't see a lot of this stuff necessarily. So these stories are very, very powerful. And that's why we want to get them out there, because, we want to help solve as much of this problem as we can. And even if we can just save one life, it's by doing this podcast, it's definitely worth it. So welcome to our show, Victor and Nokey. We really appreciate you being on to tell your story.
Thank you.
So, Victor, we're going to start with you, and then we'll get to Nokey later. And Victor, why don't you just tell us a little bit of your story and how you got into led down the wrong path into drugs and alcohol and things like that. Tell us just how that all started.
Okay. So my name is Victor, and I'm in long-term recovery. What that means to me is that I got a little over 5.5 years clean. Um, so I would say my addiction started at a very young age. I remember being in kindergarten and first grade, and my parents would go four-wheeling every weekend, and they would take us with them, and they would hand me their drinks to hold them, and I would, take sips of them, and then just keep taking sips until the can was empty, and then open up a new one and hand it to my dad. You know, and then there was just always alcohol and weed around my house. My mom used to grow, and about 9 years old, I got curious, and I was like, what is my mom always smoking this stuff for? So that led to me, sneaking into her purse late at night and stealing her roaches and like running out in the backyard and lighting one up, and you know um, taking a puff or two, start coughing, and then run back in the house and put it back in her coin purse and go to my room. And then that just led to me being curious all the time about what everybody was doing. Around 12, 13, and my alcohol use got pretty heavy. I would go to the liquor store and tell them I was there to pick up, some cigarettes for my dad and some beer, and they would sell it to me thinking that I was really taking it home to my dad, and that's just how it was where I grew up in California. I grew up in outside of LA, and that just progressed. I would go to parties when I was like 14, 15, and it was just my way of fitting in was drinking. At 15 years old, I knew it was a problem. I started running with gangs, and I was, every time I would get arrested, I would be under the influence of something. You know, Around 15, I started smoking PCP, which is to me, when I look back at it, was probably like the hardest drug that I ever did. You know, just because the way it made me feel, the way it made me react. You didn't know what you were doing until the next day when somebody told you. And then from there, it just kept progressing. At 15, I asked my parents for help. I told them I was an alcoholic, and I went to treatment. And at the time, I don't think I was ready, because I would go to AA meetings, and I would sit in the meeting, and the meeting would start, and I'm like, I don't want to hear all these old people talk. So I would go in the bathroom. I'd always take two tall cans with me, and I'd slam them in the bathroom. And then I would walk back into the meeting and start talking to the guy next to me, and they would tell the guy who was signing the slips, like, get him out of here, he's drinking. So they would kick me out of the meeting, sign my slip, and I would just go about my day. So when I went to court, the judge would see my slip was signed, and I was cool. Everything was all right. So I went to treatment the first time at 15. and they gave me an abuse when I left treatment, and I didn't drink for about, I don't know, about a month, you know, and then one day I was at a party and I started drinking even on Antabuse, and I was expecting to get sick. I didn't get sick, and then at that time, my disease was progressing. You know, I went from, smoking weed and PCP and drinking every day to, at 17, when my parents moved to Vegas, I found this new drug. It was meth, and I really liked it. I can stay up for days, and I can go to work, and I can, I looked old enough to sneak into the casinos, and they thought I was 21, so I would be in the casinos all the time, you know. And the whole time growing up, I knew how to make money off of drugs. So that was another addiction in itself. Was like, okay, I could make fast, easy money, you know. And when I started working at 17, I was making like $3 an hour, 3.15 an hour, and on a weekend, if I was selling drugs, I could make a few $100s. So I got addicted to the lifestyle, being involved in gangs and making money, and drug use was just like daily life for me. At 21, my daughter was born, you know, and when my daughter was born, I was using the excuse that I was selling drugs to raise my daughter. That I didn't want to work, so I could buy her Pampers if I sold drugs, and I can not have to work, and I can watch my kid. Well, my daughter's mom went to jail, and I was left by myself with my daughter. At 5 weeks old, she was taken from me by CPS. Somebody reported me to CPS. You know, they took my daughter. They told my family that they were looking for me, and I just went on the run. And then when I finally got caught on some stolen car charges, I went to county jail, and I got on the phone with CPS, and they told me that I would never see my daughter again. And the first thought in my head was like, if I can't see my daughter or have my daughter in my life, what's the point in living? So when I got out of county jail, I went on this, what I call the suicide mission. And I went from 185 pounds down to 117 pounds in like 28 days. And on my 28th day, I went home and I told my family I needed help. I went to treatment, I went to the emergency room first, and I thought everybody was trying to arrest me, put me in jail. When they asked me for a UA, I got scared, and I took the IV out of my arm. My mom worked at the hospital, so I just walked out to the emergency room and told my mom, I need to go. I need to go. I was very delusional, very paranoid. When I got to my mom's house, I thought my mom was trying to kill me, when all she was trying to do was like feed me and get me to go to sleep. A couple days later, I got into detox, and when I went to this detox, I felt a little bit of comfort. They fed me, they talked to me about what was going on. They suggested that I go to treatment. I went to treatment again. This was probably like my third time in treatment, and I was 21 years old. I knew I had a problem. I was working on getting my daughter back, and everything was going good. And then I got scared. I got scared to be a parent. I got scared to like learn how to live a normal life. And I relapsed. And when I relapsed, I went pretty hard until I got arrested and went to prison. So I went to prison for a year and a half, and I got out, and all hopes of getting my daughter back were gone because I had gave up my parental rights. And that just led into a deeper and darker addiction. I just kept using and kept using it. I would go to jail, get out, so I'm going to fast forward to like 2003. I came up to Washington to visit my mom because she had moved. And I came to Washington, and I fell in love with the state, the beauty, the nature, and how calm and quiet it was. It was a different pace from living in Vegas. And 2004, I finally moved up here thinking, okay, I'm going to turn my life around. I'm going to quit using drugs. By this time I was 30 years old, and it happened all over again. I started working, I got my first paycheck, and I was like, okay, I can sell drugs successfully and not get caught up. Well, within like a month and a half, I had new charges. I was on my way to prison. I did another 18 months. I got out and immediately went right back into the same thing. I started doing a bunch of forgeries and identity thefts to support my habit. Ended up going back to prison again for 3 years, and I got out. I said, I'm going to change. That didn't happen. So 2010, I went back again for 4 years it was a 5-year sentence. I did 4 years, and I was made all these promises to my family. I'm going to change, things are going to get better. And they didn't. I went out and used until March of about the end of February 2015 is when I was like, I'm done. And I was in this really bad breakup in this relationship, and I tried to end my own life. I'm grateful that it was unsuccessful. I had this cord wrapped around my neck. The door popped open, thinking it was my ex-girlfriend walking in the room. It wasn't. It was her dad coming to check and see if she was there. And I ripped this cord off my neck, and then I left that house. My family took me back in, and I was just done. I didn't know what to do. I had been in the program before, so I got really vocal on social media about the pain that I was going through. And one of my friends reached out to me that was in a 12-step program, and she said, hey, man, you should really try going to a meeting. And I did, and then I went to this meeting, and I told people who I was and why I was there, and I cried. And, a couple of days later, I got into a fight, and grateful that it was only a fight, and because it could have turned out worse. The plan was to go and, shoot somebody, and whatever happened. So I went home and I drank, had a couple beers, and then I called my friend, told her what happened. And she's like, dude, tomorrow go back to a meeting, start all over. And so I've held on to that clean date of March 26, 2015. So I'll talk a little bit about, what I do for my recovery. I work a 12-step program. It's an anonymous program, but what I do for my recovery outside of that 12-step program is I try to give people hope. I share my story a lot, not only in the 12-step atmosphere. I share my story publicly. I've spoken at different events, whether it's a recovery event. I've spoken at the state capitol. I have friends today who are in politics. I work real closely with the drug court in my area. I also sponsor a lot of people. Life is just different. When I came in, I had no clue what life was about. I didn't know how to live life. I didn't know if I wanted to live, but I kind of did. I was desperate. I was scared. Today my life is amazing. I said I got a little over 5.5 years in recovery, and today my life looks different. My outlook on life is different. The relationship with my daughter has changed. She's 25 years old now, and we kind of talk. She didn't get to never know who her dad was, but working the steps in the program that I work, I was able to make amends to her as a father. Like, I got to tell her sorry that I wasn't there, and this is what I'm doing to change my life. So for me, life is like I said, is just totally different. I don't know. I do a lot in the community, as far as not only recovery. I do homeless outreach, so I work with people who are homeless, and I try to give them hope as well, because a lot of people that are homeless struggle with addiction. I was once homeless. I'm an ex-felon who thought I would never be anybody in life, and today I have purpose.
So tell me about when you were like contemplating suicide and you were just kind of done. Um, you're you were doing meth at the time and cocaine, or just meth, or
So in 1995, I was when I went on that suicide mission after I gave up my, I thought I wasn't going to see my daughter again. I was doing meth, cocaine, PCP, drinking, and then in 2015, when I tried to kill myself, I was just doing meth. Actually, I was coming off of meth.
and you were down to tell us about your weight. You had lost a whole bunch of weight, correct?
Yeah, I lost. I don't know what it was, like close to 70 pounds, I think it was.
You were down to 117, right? Is that what you were telling me?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, definitely not a healthy weight then.
No, no, I didn't look healthy at all. I literally looked like a skeleton with skin on it.
Wow. Wow. So tell us, you did a couple stints in prison. Tell us, did prison help your addiction at all? Were you able to do drugs in prison?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's drugs in prison. There's drugs in county jails. Um, it was more like, for me, prison didn't change nothing. It's just because they call them, correction centers, doesn't mean they're correcting anything. And it also depends on the lifestyle that you live while you're in there. Me, I was involved with gangs, so the whole time I was in prison, I was caught up in the gang lifestyle. And I wasn't really trying to change. Every time I went to prison, when I would get out, I would tell people, like, "Hey, I'll be back," and they would tell me, like, "Why would you want to come back here?" I'm like, "Because this is home for me."
Wow.
To me, that was the norm.
Wow. So, Janet, what kind of questions do you have for Victor? There's a lot going on. Thank you for sharing your
Wow.
story, Victor. And
Yeah.
congratulations on your recovery of 5.5 years.
Thank you.
I guess, one thing that hits home to me is it seems like the 12-step program worked for you. And why was that any different than some of the other programs that you were involved in? Was it partly because of the program itself, or was it just you were ready to make that change?
I honestly think the 12-step programs for me is about, it gives me something that I never really thought I had in my life. It gave me unity. It taught me how to look at my past and see what the problems were. When I was out there getting loaded, I thought that I loved the lifestyle. I thought I loved going to prison. I thought I loved the money. I thought I loved getting high. I thought I loved the drugs. But in reality, what I was doing was I was numbing the pain, of giving my daughter up for adoption and not being a dad, holding resentments towards my parents and people that had hurt me, but when I started working these steps, it opened up like, okay, well, this is the real reason why you were getting loaded, because you didn't want to deal with none of this, and I never knew how to live like life on life's terms. I always thought that everything was everybody else's fault. When I would go to prison and somebody like did a controlled buy on me, I used to blame them, and not look at my own actions.
So, tell us how your dad's health was failing when you were clean. Is that correct? And tell us how that kind of
Yeah.
changed your perspective.
So, you know, my whole life growing up and being incarcerated, and my dad was like always there no matter what. Like if he had to work and it was a visiting day, he would call off and he would come visit me. And he would always like love me to the best of his ability. So the last time I was in prison, my dad's health was really bad and he was down in Mexico with his wife. And there was a time when I would call him every week and we would talk. And one time I tried calling him and I couldn't get a hold of him. And my sister called the jail and was like, we don't know what's going on with dad. And like it just like I would always like freak out. It would like cause me so much stress, and I would like couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. And when I got out of prison, my dad was okay. It was like right before I got out, he came back from Mexico. He was sick down there, and we actually had some people like lie to us and tell us that my dad was dead, so they can get money. They were like, "Oh, if you send us $5,000, we can have his body returned to you." And really, they were just lying, trying to get money out of my family. But when I got home, me and my brother-in-law had a conversation one night, and he says, "Victor," he's like, "how would you feel if you were in prison and your dad died?" And he's like, "I would hope you would feel like a piece of crap." There was harsher words used, and it was just like a slap in the face, and it was like, okay, I don't want to be there in prison when my dad dies, and I was fortunate enough, like my biggest fear has always been, okay, if I lose my dad, I'm gonna get loaded, you know. But I got to watch other people walk through death and how they experienced it and how they handled it over the years. That when my dad passed away, and I had I think I had like 3 years and a couple weeks, I was able to like reach out and tell people what happened. My fiance was there, like she was there to like comfort me. Like I had people there to tell me like, you don't have to go get high. What you need to do is get to a meeting and share about your pain. You know, um, I literally got to walk in my mom called me on April 8th, 2018, and she said, Victor, she's like, you might want to get to the hospital. Your dad's not doing too good. And I was able to like get in the room, grab my dad's hand and tell him that I love him. And he like took his last breath, you know, and
Wow.
yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. But, you know, one thing that my dad, like, so my dad started to like not really be able to grasp what I was doing, like over like my first 3 years of recovery. He like when I would go over, he would always be like, "Hey, mijo, how you doing? You want a beer?" And I'm like, "Dad, I don't drink no more." And he's like, "Well, why not?" I'm like, "Dad, because if I drink, I'm gonna go back to prison." You
Right.
know,
Mhm.
and that's the reality of my disease. That if I could think I could just drink one beer, I know me. I drink one beer, I want to go get a bunch of drugs, and if I get a bunch of drugs, I'm gonna go back to prison. You know, so like my dad never really understood like my recovery, but he knew that I wasn't locked up. You know, he knew I would be able to be there for his birthdays and holidays.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you talk about when we were in our connection call, you talked about, alcohol's an epidemic, crack's an epidemic, heroin's an epidemic. Why not make recovery an epidemic? What does that mean to you?
Okay. So yeah. So like I said, I do a lot of stuff outside the rooms of recovery, right? So I got involved with this organization called Washington Recovery Alliance. And one day we were having a board retreat, and we were up in the peninsula somewhere at this really nice place, and we were sitting down, and our chair was like, there's all these epidemics that are killing people, and she's like, why don't we make recovery the epidemic? So I was like, let me hashtag that, let me blow it up, let me make it big on social media, and that's what I did. Then I made myself a t-shirt, and that t-shirt blew up into like people wanting t-shirts. So I used that platform. But for me, what make recovery the epidemic means is let's make something that can destroy something. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like right now there's a pandemic going on that's killing people. Well, let's make a positive an epidemic that can destroy the disease of addiction.
So where can people get a hold of those shirts if they want some shirts?
They can message me on Facebook. Um, I also have a Facebook page called Make Recover the Epidemic. There's two pages. There's a girl that's like used the name, and then there's my personal page that has, it's Make Recovery the Epidemic. It's like make underscore recovery underscore the underscore epidemic 2018.
Okay, perfect. Well, we will put that in the show notes too when we edit this, so we can link. People can get to that link really easy. So, well, thank you for sharing your story. I really, really appreciate it. We're gonna let. There we are streaming that right now. There's your Facebook page, Victor. We're gonna let Nokey share his story now, and let's just go ahead and talk first about your homeless outreach, Victor, and
Yes.
where you work now, and we'll put a plug in for them too.
Yeah, I've worked for the Women's Resource Center. I'm the homeless outreach coordinator. It's North Central Women's Resource Center in Wenatchee.
And you are also part of the Washington Recovery Coalition, correct?
Central Washington Recovery Coalition. I'm the chair of that. Uh, I'm currently a board member for the Washington Recovery Alliance as well.
Awesome, awesome. We're streaming that right now to put a plug in for them. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that story, and hang
Thank
tight because
you.
we want to have a little round table discussion with you and Nokey. So Nokey, welcome back to our show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being on. So why don't you just go ahead and like Victor did and tell us your story?
Well, my name's Nokey Pando. I'm from Moses Lake. I was born and raised. Um, my story is similar to a lot, but I've kind of realized that everybody faces setbacks in their life, and the biggest setback in my life that I had to face and deal with is addiction. Um, Mine started off at a young age, at the age of like 13. Um, prior to that, I was introduced to alcohol here and there with, uncles and grandpa asking to go grab a beer from the fridge. And, like I think Victor was saying something along them lines of just taking a sip here and there, that kind of, I think that like set that stage for the years to come. So growing up, I never had a father figure around. I never had a dad around. So when my brother got out of prison after doing, like 10 years in prison, he was the first and only father figure that I had around, and I cling to everything that he did. Unfortunately, he was at a point in his life where addiction was carrying him around as well. So I followed in his footsteps, and I made the best of what situations, became of that. In and out of jail, using drugs, selling drugs, just a criminal lifestyle, whatever it is I needed to do to get more drugs and to be a part of that lifestyle. I did it, I dropped out of high school early. I think like my junior year, I was out of high school. I'd already been disconnected from life in general. Was never able to have any steady employment because my addiction overran that every choice that I made. And ultimately, it landed me in a sense of homeless. I never had a place to call my own. I was usually couch surfing, staying in motels, staying out in the elements when my addiction took me to that place. The only time I really had a solid roof over my head is when I was doing violation times for probation violations when I was in jail or when I was in prison. More recently, fast forward into some of the bottoms in my recovery, because I can, in my active addiction, I can always go deeper. That shovel was at the bottom of that pit waiting for me just to dig more. But one of the lower times was fast forward about 5 years ago, going on 6 years ago. I remember being in my active addiction, running the streets, doing what I only knew best to do. And I remember I was really sick. I had an injury on my ankle. I remember out of desperation, I had all the substances to self-medicate. But I remember going into the hospital in Wenatchee, and in my mind, I wanted to go in there and get a brace. I needed a brace for my ankle because I had left the hospital a couple months before with a fractured ankle and was supposed to see a specialist and never did. So in desperation, I went to that hospital trying to get a brace, and they ended up telling me that I have a severe pneumonia and that I have a blood infection. These were just I felt fine, so I thought I felt fine. Apparently, the drugs had me in a not really a conscious state of mind. When I had severe blood infection, they wanted to admit me. I thought that out there selling drugs and doing drugs was more important than that. So I told them that I couldn't. They said they wanted to admit me for a couple of days, and if they didn't give me these antibiotics intravenously, that the likelihood of that blood infection taking my life was very high. And even at that point, my best thinking was trying to negotiate with them and compromise, and said, look, okay, I'll stay for a few hours. And that's what ultimately, that was my decision, that I would stay for a few hours to get some antibiotics intravenously. And I remember them hooking me up to some antibiotics intravenously. And I remember drifting off to sleep. And the next thing I know, I woke up, and what I'm being told by my sister is that I was in a coma, that I had been in a coma for the last 21 days with congestive heart failure, severe pneumonia. I had liquid I had like 1.5 liters of liquid in my left lung. And then my heart function was down to, I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was 25 or 23%. And I drifted out of consciousness. I ended up leaving discreetly, so to say, like without being discharged and without the doctor's recommendation, going against every recommendation the doctor told me. And I left, and I continued to use. A couple days later, as I got home, I continued to use. And throughout the next, year and a half, about 18 months, not even 2 years, I continued to use, doing the same thing and fighting my health every single day. I remember being in and out of the hospital out of desperation, going there, not because I really cared about my health, but because I had retained so much water that I became morbidly obese. I was nearly 500 pounds, over 150 pounds of water weight. I was dying. I was slowly committing suicide in reality. And I'd go there in desperation just so hopefully they can do something to drain off some of that liquid so that I could get around better, so that way I can continue going places and doing it is what I wanted to do in my active addiction. I remember having, hundreds of hospital visits and probably 50 some admits, within a less than a year period, due to my congestive heart failure. That led me again. I go into the hospital in desperation, and I wake up again by my sister, faithfully next to me, because she's the one that stuck by my side through all this, telling me that once again, ironically enough, that I had woken up again from another medically drug-induced coma for ironically another 21 days. I know I made this other video, and it's the only words that come to mind is I would like to say that that's when I pulled my head out of my rear end and decided to make some significant changes in my life that would alter my path. And it wasn't. It just and thinking of those times, this reminds me to the lows and the bottoms that addiction can take a person, to when a person's life has no value, that doing the next right thing is unheard of. So a couple days after being out of the hospital, once again, I'm back into my active addiction, fully going. I like to think that a power greater than myself, my higher power, sent a blessing in disguise, and that blessing, I was afforded the opportunity to go to prison for a short period of time for some charges that I had from my past mistakes. Going into prison, I didn't speak this to my sister or anybody else for that matter, but in my heart, I knew that I was going into prison, that I was going to die in prison. I was 495 pounds in a wheelchair on oxygen, and my heart function was down to 11%.
How old were you?
At the age of, let me see, at 34.
Wow.
I'm 34. Yeah, I'm 36 now. So, so my heart's down to 11%. I'm in contact only in desperation because I can't leave my sister's house. I'm in a hospital bed in her living room for 3 months before I go to prison. And honestly, not by choice, not by choice at all. If I had the ability to get up and move around and walk on my own to get places, I would have not have been at my sister's. Again, I like to think my higher power immobilized me, made it crippled me, so to say, if that's what needed to be done for the months going into prison. And even then, I still couldn't. I wasn't following every doctor's order. I wasn't using. I had been clean for a couple months before going to prison, but I still wasn't I could only take a certain amount of water in each day because I was retaining all the water, and I couldn't even abide by that. I could not. I couldn't even, everything that I was doing, it was compulsively and obsessive. Even when it came to something as simple as drinking water when I wasn't supposed to. So I went to prison. The prison, my doctor really thought that I probably wouldn't make it in prison either, because the reality is that you get the correct medical attention and the much needed medical attention that I would need in my situation in a prison, in an institution, was highly unlikely, or that it was going to be adequate enough, sufficient enough to address, my medical issues. So I went in there with no faith, not one bit of faith. And they started taking me to my cardiologist appointments in downtown Spokane. I was in rough shape, real rough shape. But I in prison, I remember praying to my higher power and thinking that, hey, maybe I can make it through this. I started losing a few pounds. I think I mean, a few, it just seems like a little because how much water weight I had on me. I dropped maybe 30, 35 pounds. I could walk with a walker and maybe a cane with somebody walking on the side of me sometimes. The oxygen wasn't so demanding when I slept. So just that little tiny bit of hope, that little bit of faith, I ran with it. And I started trying to work on that relationship with my higher power, praying, picking up self-help books, recovery books, being around like-minded people. In a prison, sometimes you have limited ability to what kind of people you're around. I opted out going into a therapeutic program where it's a therapeutic community where everybody not necessarily is there by choice, but the whole theme of the whole feeling of the community is recovery based, required classes and such. So that gave me a little bit of structure on a day-to-day basis. That got me my face in front of some books that were talking about things that in my innermost heart I was thinking of, but wasn't really sure if I wanted to really try to live a new life. By the end of my prison sentence, and it was only 10 months or 11 months that I was there, the last few months, I remember thinking to myself that I was willing, that I came to the point where I could walk around with no walker, no cane, no assistance. I was still gaining muscle, my muscle back because I had lost so much in my active addiction and my times being in a coma. I started working on trying to becoming willing. So I remember telling myself for a few months before getting out that I was willing to do whatever it takes to recover. I didn't really know at that point what that consisted of. I figured if I kept telling myself and that I spoke it into existence, that maybe it would just be that, and I did. And I kept on telling myself that I would do anything. When I got out, I got released to Moses Lake to my sister's house. And I knew of a program that I'd heard saved lives and found and gave people a new way to live before. So I went into those rooms, that 12-step program, and I started being involved with it. I put myself in the middle of the circle. I started doing things that everybody else was doing because I knew the choices that I would make in my past were just going to lead me back to the same old roads, and I didn't want to do that no more. I became a part of. I followed suggestions, and I continued to do the next right thing. And if I didn't know what the next right thing is, I just continued moving forward and stayed clean a day at a time. And my higher power continued to work in my life. He kept on putting people and places and things and opportunities in front of me to guide me. Especially there's a few that really, really stick out to me. And one of them is actually Victor. Victor was this guy I kept on seeing in social media, and he was just out there. He was popular, so to say, in a humble way. Very, very humble man. And he kind of looked like me, big Mexican dude, has a past like me. I'm like, hey, because I want to go where I feel comfortable, right? And when I want to seek out the people that make me feel comfortable, and just by his presence, I felt comfortable with that. And so I started talking to him on Facebook. I started reaching out. I started going to Wenatchee, and then I had an old friend of mine that I grew up with, Joey. Ironically enough, it's funny how you have us three on here because those two men are the most fundamental people in my recovery that outside the rooms of the program that I work. They gave me, they led a path, and they showed the light into open-mindedness and to a different level. They showed me that it was okay to not be anonymous outside of the rooms, that it was okay to share my experience, strength, and hope in my recovery story publicly and without disgrace and without any shame or guilt behind it, for a purpose, in hopes that it reaches that one person that's either, and not necessarily just the person, struggling with substance use disorders, mental health disorders, people of, mothers and fathers, sorry, I got flies plugging around, mothers and fathers of kids or loved ones that are suffering from addiction as well, and throughout the years, I remember hearing Victor talk about that he has so many different people of all walks of life that reach out to him because they've heard his story. And now I'm in that same position. I get messages and calls from people on a daily basis, seeking guidance, asking for help because ultimately because I've decided to go public with my story, that I've been able to go be vulnerable about it and just let it out there and let it be a beacon of light, so to say, or a testimony of faith, whatever, however you want to look at it, you know. And I owe my life that I have today for people like Victor and the people that came before me, for the program that I work, for the 12 steps in that program that gave me an opportunity to look at myself, what part I played, be able to address it, face it, you know, face to face, instead of like burying it anymore. Face it and then leave it behind me where it's meant to be. You know,
Well,
I'm
that's a
grateful for that.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that is a powerful story, and thank you so much for sharing. So, Victor's part of your recovery family. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So, tell us what's that mean. What does that mean to you guys? What does your recovery family mean to you guys?
For me,
go ahead. No.
go ahead, Victor.
No, you first.
All right. For me, either without any reasons why, whether my fault or just the way things happen, is I don't have blood family that is really close to me. I don't have a lot of blood family that were so so close together and ingrained together, and that's just unfortunate as it is. But putting myself out there in the program, making myself available, being accountable, and being present in the lives of the people's family that I call family now around me today. I came into the rooms and I thought I would make new friends, because people said, you don't want to make new friends, places, and things, you know. And I end up acquiring a family, and that family to me is just as important as my own blood family, and I would do just for them in the same amount.
Victor, what do you think of your recovery family? What are your thoughts about that?
I think that if I didn't have a recovery family, that I wouldn't have any recovery. You know, I mean, I have a big family, but most of my family's like in California, you know, and so when I got this family that's in recovery, like I have people that'll call me on my crap, that'll hold me accountable, you know, that'll love me, you know, when I like, especially when I didn't know how to love myself, you know, it's given me hope. You know, it's like I shared earlier about, you know, the unity aspect of the program I work, you know. To me, it's like I know that if I call on Nokey and just tell him what my troubles are, that he'll give me the feedback that I need to hear, not the feedback that I want to hear. You know, there's a lot of trust that you get with people in recovery. You know, I'm not going to say that everybody in recovery is like my family, but the ones the ones that are there are the ones that are important to me, and I value their opinions.
And you guys are constantly trying to build that family too, right?
Oh yeah, like Nokey. So like Nokey has told me like, oh, at first, you know, yeah, I seen you on there, and I was like, who is this dude? You know, and there's a lot of people that, you know, when I met them, I didn't like them. I didn't like what they had to say. I didn't like their recovery. But eventually, like I've known that about myself my whole life, is the people that I thought I could trust were the ones that ended up doing me wrong, and the ones that I didn't like in the beginning are the ones that I end up loving the most.
So both you guys are recovery coaches, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
So what does it take to become a recovery coach?
40 hours of training.
And to become a recovery coach, do you have to be in recovery yourself?
No, but for me personally, I believe that like a recovery coach is somebody that helps a person through lived experience. You know, just like they have like peer to peer positions in the state of Washington, that it's pretty much off of lived experience. I know for me personally that if I went, I'll use this for an example. You know, I went to a treatment center one time, and me and the counselor that was doing my intake, we were talking, and she's telling me, oh, you know, you have a severe drug problem. And I'm like, okay, you know, are you an addict? And she told me no. I said, what are you going to do after work tonight? And she's like, well, I'm probably going to go home and have a glass of wine. I said, so then you probably couldn't relate with me. And I don't understand how you can diagnose me just because you know, you went to school and you read some books. Like for me personally, I believe that I can relate to somebody that's an addict. I can share my experience, strength, and hope with an addict, you know. And for me, I think being a recovery coach, anybody can do it as long as your heart's in the right place.
Right. So, Janet, what kind of questions do you have for Nokey and Victor?
Well, both of you brought up something that spoke very loudly to me about, a lot of times when people are faced with an addiction, there's a lot of shame. And I think our culture does it as well as ourselves. And so I'm assuming that those connections that you're making with somebody that keeps you accountable helps to dispel the shame so you can be upfront and honest with yourself. Is that what I'm hearing from both of you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I personally, I know that there's a lot of stigmas and labels that come with addiction. One of the things, that's one of the reasons why I became so boisterous about my recovery, is because a lot of people look at me, and what they see on the outside, is like I got tattoos, and I got a bald head. I got a white t-shirt. I look like somebody that the news would describe as a hoodlum or a gang member. So there's a lot of stigmas just behind the lifestyle that I used to live. And when people get into recovery, there's a lot of shame, and I know that me personally, and I know Nokey does it too, is we try to break down them walls and barriers so people don't have to just be like, oh, well, look at Victor. He looks like a gang member, you know. But when they really get to know who I am and what I'm about and what I represent, their view of me is totally like, wow, this dude has a heart. He loves people, So there is a lot of stigmas that come with recovery, with addiction, and we're trying to break down those walls.
Well, I think you guys are doing a wonderful job. So we're going to wind the show up here shortly, and I would like Nokey to start. You've got 1 minute to, if you had to sum this podcast up in 1 minute with your story, what is the point you were trying to get across? Go ahead, Nokey.
I would say that anybody out there struggling with addiction or has had been influenced by addiction or affected by it in any way, that the only way that you're going to get better, the only way that things are going to get change or anything of that sort is for a person to reach out. Like, you got to put in the work. That's just a reality. And the reality is that in my choices that I've made is that I realized that I cannot do it by myself. But there's a community of people out there that are willing to help me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. How about you, Victor?
I just want, first of all, thank you guys for inviting us to do this, and I think this platform is awesome, because we do stuff like this on Facebook as well. We used to have a bunch of live groups. One thing that I know is that if you don't seek help, like Nokey said, like, you're not going to get the help that you need. Just know that there's other people out there that are struggling. I've had multiple families reach out to me. I had a state legislator reach out to me yesterday and ask me to, introduce myself to somebody on social media so they can get to know what recovery is. And I'm a firm believer in that recovery is possible for anybody, and I'm grateful for you guys getting this out there, and like Shawn was saying earlier, like, if this helps save one person's life, that's all that matters. And that's how I look at recovery, is like, if what we're doing can help save one person's life or help one family member get some ease, that was the best part of my day.
Well, it's truly our honor and our pleasure to have you guys on. We really appreciate you guys sharing your stories and going public with it. And at Health Solutions, we talk about everything healthcare. And you guys, this is definitely a story about healthcare. I mean, your story, Nokey, about 50 hospital visits in a year, and I mean CHF when you're 31 years old. I mean, just it's amazing. And I'm assuming, I was going to ask you this. So, how is your heart, your CHF, and your lungs and stuff like that now, Nokey?
I'm doing fantastic. My cardiologist had told me actually that it was going to take, several years, 6 to 7 years, and full medication, staying off drugs, not smoking, for my heart to potentially fight back to get like a 30%. And within 8 months of my release from prison, my heart was back at a 40%, and my health is fantastic.
Awesome. And just to let you know, I imagine that is ejection fraction of 40%, which if
Yes.
that is the case, then that means your heart is considered normal, because none of our hearts eject 100%. So if you're at 40%, man, hey dude, you are back to basically 100%. I love it. That is awesome.
Yep.
It just shows you how you know your lifestyle choices can, you know, I mean, you saved your life. I mean, those that you literally saved your own life by doing that. So that's awesome. I love it. So yeah, thank you guys for being on. Tune in, our listeners and viewers. Tune in Thursday. We will have Dr. Lee Gross, and he'll be talking about his most recent trip to the White House. He was invited to the White House to talk about the most. He was one of 20 physicians in the nation to talk about the new healthcare plan that President Trump is unveiling. So you don't want to miss that. He is a very busy guy, and I'm super excited that he is going to take the time to explain that to us. So you don't want to miss that. It'll be streaming live 8 to 9 p.m. Actually, 8 to 8:30. He's only got about a half hour that he's going to give us, which I appreciate any time he can give us. You will see it streaming live right here on my personal Facebook page, the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy's YouTube site. And as always, you can catch that later when you have the edited version, as this one will be edited in a couple days, and it'll be up on the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy YouTube site. Subscribe to our YouTube site so you don't miss these, and follow me on Facebook. I'm out of friends. I've got almost 5,000 friends, so I can't get any more friends, but you can definitely follow me on Facebook. I'd appreciate it. And all the podcast forums, so iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Google Play, all those. You can listen to us there too. So thanks again, Nokey and Victor, for being on today. You've been listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham.